everyone. Thank you for coming and hearing me present on the Leather Forum's Working Together for Sustainable Supply Chain. My presentation will be about PrimeAsia's Supply Chain Transparency. I am the Environmental Manager at PrimeAsia Leather Company. Just a brief overview on what I'll be speaking about this evening. PrimeAsia's sustainability vision and our goals, how we procure our raw materials, how we ensure the traceability of our supply chain, what the leather industry includes within the larger cattle industry, the role of brands in traceability as I see it, our supply chain cooperation, and some challenges and opportunities within the leather industry. And then we will talk more about questions. I would like to make it as interactive as possible, so if you have questions while I'm speaking, please type them into the chat bar, and then I will hopefully get back to you as soon as possible with no tech glitches. Just a brief overview, if anyone doesn't know about PrimeAsia. PrimeAsia is mostly a full-grain leather tannery. We do a little bit of suedes, approximately 120 million square feet annually. We have both aniline and pigmented leathers, many big customers that you will have heard of, mostly on the footwear side. Our tanneries are located in China and Vietnam, but we have offices globally. Our sustainability goals, these are similar to many large companies that are our brands. We're trying to move towards zero waste and inefficiencies, reducing our usage of finite energy resources, utilizing more sustainable raw materials through collaboration with our supply chain, and engaging our employees, customers, and suppliers in environmentally responsible choices. We have a qualitative goal and the quantitative goal. And our quantitative goal is 30% reduction in 5 years, which we started in 2012, and this is per square foot of leather. So we want to reduce the energy, water, and waste, the energy usage, the water usage, and the waste output by 30%. And as you can see, we have met our goal in waste already by 2015. In energy, we're about 20%, so we have another 10% we need to reduce our energy further per square foot of leather. And for water, we're about 15%, about half completed. Water is the most difficult area because of the complexity of many different types of leathers and smaller batches that are coming through the tanneries in today's world. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, leather used to come through in many less colors and varieties, and there were larger batches, which was better for the energy and water usage. Just a brief overview about the leather supply chain. There's many different types of ranchers. I just put rancher as an overall category. Then it goes to the slaughterhouse. The beam house, which is our direct supplier that tans the leather and provides us the wet blue at PrimeAsia. Chemical suppliers, which also provide us the chemicals to use in our tannery. The PrimeAsia, the tannery that actually is going to produce the end finished leather. And then we send the leather onto the product manufacturing factories that then sell it to the brands. Basic supply chain overview is a big, it can have many more curves, agents, and other people added in. So this is the basic overview. So we procure our raw materials, and we have many policies that our suppliers must go through to sell to PrimeAsia. One of the policies is restricted substance. We have a restricted substance policy for both of our chemicals and for our wet glue. We also require all of our beam house suppliers, which sell us the wet blue, to undergo leather working group audits. For those of you who don't know Leather Working Group, the Leather Working Group is a third-party organization that is made up of brands, tanneries, and chemical suppliers, and it runs an environmental audit that works towards providing third-party certification, ensuring environmental quality at the beam houses and the tanneries. So PrimeAsia is also a Leather Working Group audited. For our chemical suppliers, it's more difficult. They cannot be leather working group audited, so we have them self-verify the Hague Index, which is environmental questions and also social questions. And then we're also working with our chemical suppliers to include and manage under the new brand organization, the Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals Management. And this in the future will include audits, both of the tannery and perhaps further down the line of the chemical supplier. But at this point in time, we're looking at manufacturing restricted substance policies of what is in the chemicals and how they are managed within the tannery and within our chemical suppliers. These are some of the main overreaching policies that we ask all of our suppliers to follow. We have a lot of additional policies that I haven't listed here, like MSDS from the chemical suppliers and other information that we require our suppliers to provide us. In terms of hide traceability, PrimeAsia wet blue suppliers must be leather working group audited, as I said before. 90% of our suppliers are LWG Gold. Traceability is included in this leather working group audit and is third-party certified. It is looking at whether or not we have physically marked hides coming in to all PrimeAsia tanneries. So at a PrimeAsia tannery, when you look at our wet blue coming in from our suppliers, you will be able to identify on that hide a traceability marking and be able to mark that marking directly connects back to the slaughterhouse. So we prefer that all of our hides are physically marked. Some suppliers also have a paper sourcing trail that is also acceptable in the leather working group audit, but most are physically marked so that we can easily identify by our eyes where that hide is coming from. So PrimeAsia procures our wet blue hides from the US, Brazil, and Australia. Part of the reason we procure all of our hides from the US, Brazil, and Australia is one, the traceable hides. So all of these wet blue suppliers must be leather working group audited and undergo a traceability rating audit. We also have strong collaborative relationships with all of our wet blue suppliers. All of these suppliers have national slaughterhouse regulations and inspections based on the countries that they're located in. In the US, most of our slaughterhouses are going to be following the Temple Grandin's design slaughterhouses so that the animals are not anxious when they're going into the slaughterhouse. Also, many of these slaughterhouses are NGO inspected with PETA. And we also look at World Animal Protection Index ratings, which are based on a number of factors, including the laws that protect animals and welfare standards. And these look at an overall country welfare standard for the slaughterhouses and the way the ranchers treat their animals. In terms of animal welfare, I think we all, throughout the supply chain, everyone wants the animals treated well. Well-treated cattle are usually going to gain weight faster. They're going to have a better quality hide, which then results in a better quality leather end product. The meat quality is also better if an animal is less stressed when it is going into the slaughterhouse. But all of these factors also mean a higher investment for the nutrition of the animals, making sure the slaughterhouse is up to code, and also following best practices. So ultimately, you need to make sure that the investment that the ranchers or the slaughterhouses are paying makes up for the additional cost of making sure this animal welfare standards are held to high practice level. So the payback. Will consumers pay more for humanely raised meat in our burgers or in our meat supply chains? Some of the largest wet blue suppliers that we work with at PrimeAsia think so. And they're able to receive a higher price for the humanely raised product. This is a very small percentage, I would say, of the overall meat industry. And so the goal would be to have this become a larger percentage of our meat industry. And the the meat that's purchased by suppliers and consumers in the end at the supermarket. So just in my thinking, what kind of organization can be used to present the ranchers, the farmers, the slaughterhouses with data about the demand for humanely raised cattle and what they can actually increase their prices to based on this demand? So within the larger cattle industry, the leather industry is only a portion. The raw hide is approximately 8% of the value of a steer. Cattle will never be raised fully for their hides, obviously, because over 92% of the value of a steer is the meat. The leather industry has less influence than the meat industry does in the cattle industry. So leather, just as an example, the leather industry's influence has not decreased the ranchers' use of brands on cattle. In the U.S., cattle are still branded, usually on their butt, with the farm of origin. And this obviously is a large square footage brand that usually is not utilized in most of the leather industry for, can't put it into footwear. I have seen it in a few handbags, but most of the time it cannot be used. And so the leather industry would prefer not to have cattle branded, but we haven't been able to influence that part on the supply chain to get farmers to actually stop branding their cattle. In the US, that's not true everywhere in the world. Europe and Australia do not brand their cattle, usually. And then also understand the confidentiality, because as I was showing you earlier, there's a number of stakeholders involved within the cattle industry and also the leather industry. And oftentimes data cannot be shared fluently between stakeholders because of confidentiality reasons of where they want their supply chain to go. And so usually third-party audits that do not share data are often the best means of showing traceability without sharing confidential data. So this, in my opinion, is the brand's role in traceability. I think everyone has a large education component, especially brands, because you're further up the supply chain and do not have as much visibility further down the supply chain in the farms or the slaughterhouses or the beam houses. So it's really important to educate your staff, your sales force, and your end consumers about the raw, the material traceability, and how to identify those materials in your products. I don't think I've ever walked into a store and actually had any information about the traceability of those products further down the supply chain. And I think that would be an important marketing perspective to look into. Also understand the data gaps and support suppliers investing in a traceable supply chain. A lot of suppliers have to invest significant money or communication and contacts and establish better relationships to work on traceability. And so it's not necessarily a fast change, and it often requires time and teams dedicated to looking into the traceability of their products. And also, if you want a traceable supply chain with good animal welfare practices, it's important that you reward those suppliers that are adopting these practices, either with more purchase orders or more financial gains or anything else that you can get them to get more involved in this project. I think is really important. You have to make sure it pays back for especially the stakeholders at the very end of the supply chain. And then supply chain cooperation. There's a lot of organizations that work at different areas of the supply chain. And one is the Leather Working Group, as I was talking about earlier, working to provide traceable information to the slaughterhouses and then further on down to the farms. Another one is the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. And as you saw, the leather industry is only a small portion of the entire cattle industry. So it's very important for communicating to talk more to the sustainable beef cooperation and how we can get involved in the meat industry and the leather industry as the byproduct of the meat industry. We need to be talking with the meat industry as well. I wanted to talk a little bit why natural leather. So we're talking about all the reasons we want to improve the leather industry. Why do we really want to use natural leather in the first place? Well, natural leather is a renewable material. It's obviously a byproduct of the beef industry. It's very sustainable, it's durable, it lasts for years. It's very comforting and breathable material that people want to wear on their feet. It's a premium material with a lot of versatility, and natural leather character improves with wear. So as you can see, a pair of natural leather shoes is going to last a lot longer than a plastic or a textile pair of shoes. And then leather can be made without negative damage to the environment with best available technology. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about leather being an unsustainable product, and so it's very important that we talk about all the benefits of leather and why people want leather in their products. Some challenges in the tanning industry. I think there is a lot of misconceptions about everyone sees news stories about Bangladesh or other places where the wastewater treatment plants are not running in the tanning industry. And a lot of misconceptions are concluded that the whole entire leather industry is like those tanneries that you see in the news that are not following best practices. So it's very important that the leather industry provides a connected front and shows that there's many good and innovative projects that are happening within the leather industry and that they are following regulations and innovating and pushing the best available technology that they can to make the leather as sustainable as possible. Also, the education of the end consumers. A lot of our end consumers are not close to the beginning of the leather supply chain and the cattle or the farmers. So they don't understand leather, and they don't understand the process by which their leather shoes are made. And so an education of why we want transparency throughout the supply chain and also traceability of where those materials are coming from can provide further education to those end consumers about their products. Also, as I kind of pointed out in misconceptions, we also want to improve the lowest performing members of the industry. Working together as an industry to push those members to improve their quality of manufacturing and of their energy and water usage and their waste output is very important, I think, on an overall marketing standpoint from the leather industry. And then we have many differing sustainability views, even within the industry. Very disjointed. We have tanners from all over the world, and there's obviously many different viewpoints. And trying to coordinate all these viewpoints together and make progress on issues such as traceability is often a challenge. Some opportunities in the tanning industry. Obviously, the supply chain traceability. We really want to promote becoming more and more traceable. Leather has a very good opportunity to become traceable. We have some of the most traceable products already, going back to the farm. In the case of PrimeAsia, much more so than many other products that go into footwear, such as textiles, such as cotton. A lot of times it's very difficult to figure out where that raw material is coming from. So we've really made great strides in improving the traceability of leather, and I think we need to talk about that beyond our industry, because we have made strides that many other industries have not. Also, enhancing the appeal of leather to the younger generation. I think as leather becomes more of a luxury product, we want the younger generation to think of buying a leather product that they can have in their possession for many, many years to come and be very sustainable is a very overwhelmingly sustainable option for the younger generation, rather than the buy and discard mentality of I buy a pair of tennis shoes and I discard it 6 months later. Leather also needs to become an even higher quality byproduct for the meat industry. Obviously, I myself don't eat a lot of meat. I am a meat eater, but I'm not promoting people eat more and more meat. But as long as people are eating meat, we're going to need to find good quality byproducts for the hides that are coming because of the meat industry's, the consumers' consumption of meat. And then also, tanneries are also working towards the best-in-class new innovations and coming up with new ways to manufacture leather in many places that are using less energy and less water, and trying to get full cycle and not having as much waste output. And then I'm done speaking. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. I think APLF will be forwarding me on any questions that are sent in or typed in. I appreciate everyone coming and listening. I know it's a rather odd time. It's late at night in Hong Kong, early in the US, and afternoon in Europe. So I appreciate you all taking the time to come and hear me speak virtually. And I would hope that if anyone has any questions, you can easily approach me now or in a later bit of time. And it looks like the APLF organizer says we don't have any questions at the moment, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to type them in, and if you don't, thank you again for tuning in to hear me speak. So APLF said anyone has any questions or further questions, that you can send the questions to info@aplf.com. So that is the email to send your questions to, info@aplf.com. Thank you so much, and have a good evening and a good start to your day or afternoon. And I thank you again for joining us. Yep, we have one question. One question is misunderstandings that are related with the use of chemicals such as OPP, for example, and can I comment on this? Yes, so OPP is originally a lot of brands and RSLs for brands thought that OPP was not a sustainable method for preserving raw hides. And now I would say that 95% of our brands that we work with at PrimeAsia have switched to now promoting OPP as the most sustainable way to preserve hides. So OPP, I think it just took some time and some education and also some research studies to have the brands switch their overall thinking from OPP as being a negative inclusion in chemicals to actually being a positive. And I think it's always important that we have more research from our chemical suppliers and also from third parties, especially when we know that certain chemicals are positive in the supply chain, and we need to educate and promote those usage of chemicals instead of talking to the brands and not having any backup. So being able to supply information to the brands about why we want to use something is really important. And I think if there is a good reason and rationality for using that chemical, then usually we've had a lot of success in switching the brands RSLs. And then another question is, what do you attribute the recent leather raw material drop at the same rate that happened in 2008? So I was not in the leather industry in 2008, but I can talk briefly about the leather raw material cost drop right now. So the raw material of our wet glue increased in cost a lot in 2014, and mostly this was due to high demand costs and a low availability of good hides because of droughts and a lack of herd size in many areas of the world. The demand then dropped in 2015 with a lot of new regulations coming into play and a few tanneries being shut down for not meeting regulations, and the costs then went down to lows that haven't been seen since around 2008. Now I think a lot of people think we've kind of met the limit and we're kind of bouncing around on the bottom of the raw material cost. Again, I'm not an expert in this area. There are many experts, and so I would say reach out to some of the organizations that deal specifically with raw material costs to get more information. Thank you again. I don't think we have any more questions. If anyone has any more? Nope, I think we're good. So thank you again, and have a good rest of your day or evening as the location you're in. Thanks. Bye.